everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the LFC Red Poets podcast. I'm your host, Les Lawson, and I'm joined tonight by Tom Keegan, Pete Warburton, Mike Wilson, and a very special guest tonight, David Fairclough. We're here tonight. It's a podcast we didn't really want to do, but we feel that we should do, looking back at the career of the legend who is Kevin Keegan, who passed away sadly aged 75 yesterday. Dave, we'll start with you, seeing as, you were closer to him, you knew him personally. Our condolences go to you as a friend and former teammate. Tell us a little bit about the man who you knew as a teammate.
Well, as a young lad coming into the Anfield environment, I was overawed. I'd been a Liverpool fan, as a young boy, watching Liverpool through the glorious 60s and then the early 70s when Kevin came on the scene, 1971. But then being invited to be an apprentice in 1974, well, now you're sort of in the Anfield atmosphere, in around the dressing rooms, looking at people like Kevin Keegan, Emily Hughes, Tommy Smith, really intimidated. These had been my heroes in those glory years that I mentioned, and now you were kind of privy to their daily goings on, kind of thing. You're hearing their conversations, able to sort of listen to their jokes and all the banter that they would be taking part in. And I'd go back. I was living in Cantrell Farm then. Or Canny Farm, for those that know it that well, and repeating some of these things to my mates, and they couldn't believe it that Keegan said this or Emily Hughes said that, and it was. Well, to say it was a dream come true. Being around those guys was incredible. But Kevin Keegan had that special aura. A sort of a mystery behind him, in as much as he was a superstar. He was the golden boy, if you like, of the team. The way he bounced into Anfield every morning, bright and lively, and very trendy at the time, flares, platform shoes, all that type of thing. You'd look at people like Kevin Keegan in particular, and think, gosh, what a superstar kind of thing, and how lucky were we, But you're then gonna sort of share the training ground with these guys, and you couldn't be allowed to, you couldn't allow yourself to be overawed, because now you had to perform, and if you had any hopes of advancing in the game, then you certainly couldn't be in awe of these fellas. Couldn't sort of stand back and watch. You had to get in amongst them and then start to prove your worth. And within a couple of years, I'd broken into the first team. And now at that point, you really do have to get over that sort of being starstruck, and it was amazing to be around that group. But certainly Kevin Keegan, who, as I say, at that day, in those times, he'd taken over from George Best, let's say, who'd been the sort of the glamour boy of English football. Kevin Keegan was the big one, the big star. It was very, very heady times.
Tom, when you think about it, Kevin Keegan signed for us on the 3rd of May 1971, which was just prior to the FA Cup final against Arsenal. We paid 33,000 for him from Scunthorpe. He made his debut on the 14th of August 1971. After one pre-season, he scored on his debut against Nottingham Forest after about 12 minutes. In his career at Liverpool, he played 323 games and scored 100 goals. He was with us for 6 seasons. In 71-72, he made 42 appearances and scored 11 goals and had 6 assists. 72-73, he made 64 appearances, would you believe? He scored 22 goals and had 19 assists. In 73-74, he played 61 games, scored 19 goals and had 8 assists. 74-75. He only played 42 games that season because of a sending off in the Charity Shield. He scored 12 goals and had 6 assists. 75-76, 57 games, 16 goals and 16 assists. And then 76-77, which was his final season at Liverpool, 57 games, 20 goals and 18 assists. Now, when you look at those numbers, right, it shows you one thing, that he was very, very rarely injured. He was always available. He was Liverpool's main player. And he won, in those 6 seasons, he won 3 league titles, 2 UEFA Cups, the European Cup and the FA Cup, and in 3 of the seasons where we won the league, we also won a European trophy as well. That's some record, isn't it, Tom?
Unbelievable.
Who we paid 33,000 for.
You know what? I remember the first time we got to see him. It was at Nottingham Forest. We was down in, and it was a slight. It wasn't like a miss it, but like it was a slow poke to the corner. And and who'd have thought from that moment and from that second on, he would explode into, as David called him, and rightly, a superstar. He was the key. He was the key for everything for Liverpool at that stage. I was just looking at them stats as well. When you were talking, you're looking at in the following 71, he introduced himself to the league. He was relatively unknown, but in his performances, he was incredible. He gave the fans something, because Shanks had broke the side up, and it was a rebuild. We'd gone to the FA. I'd gone to the FA Cup final and the FA Cup semi-final against Everton in 71, and then it was the breaking up of a side, and Kevin Keegan come into that side and just took it to a different level. With Emlyn as well, and you just think, what a footballer, what a man. And we'll go on a lot longer when later on in the podcast when we've been introduced to him or spoken to him, but what a footballer, unbelievable player, made things happen out of nothing, worked incredibly hard for the team. He was just, as David said, he was the ultimate superstar.
Pete, did you go to that game against Notts Forest when he made his debut? And what's your early memories of this new kid on the block as he was then? Kevin Keegan, who'd come from nowhere, all of a sudden was starting for Liverpool. If I remember rightly as well, and I might be wrong here, I think he started the season because Ian Callaghan had a cartilage had done his cartilage and had an operation and was unfit. So he was taken over from an ultimate legend who played more games for Liverpool than anybody else. So it was a daunting task for him to come in and make his debut at Anfield, wasn't it?
Yeah. In answer to your question, no, I didn't go to the Forest game, because around that time, living on the Wirral, me and my dad used to get our football fix at Trammy Rovers, of all places, because it was walking distance from our house. But I used to go occasionally over the water, as we say, to games, and my dad was a Blue, so sometimes we'd go to Goodison, and sometimes we'd go to Anfield's, but I missed out on that one. Obviously saw the goal, on Match of the Day and stuff, but it just seemed to be the right time for Kevin to join us. As you say, came from Scunthorpe, little club, and along with other players who came through, from lower divisions. You think of Clem and even Emlyn from Blackpool and stuff like that. That was the way it was those days. But around that time, quite a few of the big clubs, if you want, the fashionable big clubs, had their own superstar, and you all know about Georgie Best, and Chelsea had Osgood. I think Arsenal, the darling boy down there with Charlie George, and it just seemed to be the right time for Kevin. And he came in, scored on his debut. And then I think the next goal he scored, certainly at Anfield, was a couple of weeks later or so, against Leicester City in a 3-2 win. But it was just his enthusiasm from the minute he walked on the pitch, and it was infectious. not just for the players around him, but the crowd. He just got the crowd going, and obviously I started going more regularly around 1974 with my mates from school, and at that time he was obviously in his pomp. He was although he was small in stature for a forward, he was the big man, wasn't he? He was the one, and he was the one that sort of broke my heart, I suppose, when he did eventually leave, because I thought after Kevin had gone, I thought that'd show a demise in Liverpool. But he was like David said, he was the superstar, whether he wanted it thrust upon him or not. But it was just through his total enthusiasm for the game. And as I say, it rubbed off on other players. It certainly rubbed off on the crowd. He'd run on the pitch, and it was just like setting a bonfire going. It was just fantastic. And there's so many memories from that first goal against Nottingham Forest to his last appearance in Rome, where he won the penalty against Bertie Vogts that night, and all in between. There's so many memories come flooding back about Kevin Keegan of the goals he scored, and I was thinking of them. Since I heard the sad news yesterday, some of the goals he'd scored. I was lucky enough to get a cup final ticket in '74, and he scored 2 at Wembley that day. It's just sad. I mean, we heard the news a few weeks ago that he was ill with cancer, and he just hoped that, even though it was a stage 4, you just hoped he had enough fight in him, and I'm sure he did fight till the end. But he had enough fight in him to see it off, and I think it came as a real shock yesterday to me. I got a phone call mid-afternoon about it. I was out, and I got a phone call off my brother-in-law to say that he passed, and I was really upset over it. But yeah, he was just they called him all sorts of names, a dynamo. He was just effervescent. He was, as I say, he was so infectious when he played, and then he formed that partnership with Tosh, didn't he? And they just went on to great things between them. Setting goals up for one another. It's not just. I mean, I think the press have made a lot of the Newcastle connection, and probably rightly so, in the fact that he played for them and obviously managed them twice. But don't forget it. He was at Southampton and Hamburg, where he got his European Football of the Year awards and stuff. There's going to be a lot of people mourn Kevin Keegan, not just Liverpool, but obviously it was at our place that he really made his name.
Mike, as a young boy as well, he must have been somebody who made a big impression on you. And do you remember his debut as well against Nottingham Forest, when he was unknown to any of us, really?
It was a little bit before my time in terms of watching Les. I saw an interview, a snippet with Shanks earlier today, where he said he talked about his first goal, and he said it's a fluke, but it's a great fluke or something like that. But no, I really first started watching Liverpool around about the '74 Cup final. In fact, my first game was in the April before that, and obviously Kevin was playing, and 7 minutes into the game, he won a penalty which Alec Lindsay put away against QPR. And I've said on this pod before that the 2 players who made me fall in love with Liverpool were Kevin Keegan and Emlyn Hughes. And straight after the cup final, I mean, I'd been 9, I think. Straight after the cup final, I just got a hand-me-down old Liverpool top, and I was just buzzing about Kevin Keegan after that. And so my mum decided she cut up a handkerchief and sewed a number 7 on the back of that kind of hand-me-down from my brother football shirt. The first time it went in to wash, it went from being a white number 7 to a pink number 7 on the back of the shirt. But he was just. He scored a penalty in the second or third game I watched at home to Birmingham, and he was just. It was impossible to take your eyes off him because he was everywhere. He was fantastic, and he became my favourite player for a long time, and I was just. It was one of those, I saw an interview with him today, and he's saying around about that time, kind of getting on for 77, he said, we could lose games, but nobody could beat us because we were that good at that time. Everything was working in that team at that point in time. He said, we felt like if we didn't win a game, it was down to us and not the opponents. It felt that good. And it was so good to watch. I mean, it was just compelling stuff, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, I was at that game in 1971 when he made his debut. And it's amazing, isn't it, when the news broke yesterday, I was on the phone to Tom. Tom had just rang me and we were chatting away. And next thing, we got a message off. I got a message off one of the people who listen to the pod, Garth, to say that Kevin had passed away. And then I started thinking then about that game against Nottingham Forest at Anfield in 1971. And I can remember sort of getting up on the Saturday morning and coming downstairs and my dad saying to me, are you going out to play with your mates after football in the street? And I said, yeah, probably. He said, oh, okay then. He said, so you won't want to come to the match and see Kevin Keegan make his debut then? I said, oh yeah, I want to go to the match. And so off we went to Anfield in the Annie Road end. And obviously he scores after about 12 minutes or something. And next thing, I'm mesmerised and I've got a new hero. And, you've all said the way he played the game. He played the game with enthusiasm. He played the game like every game was his last. He gave every ounce of energy that he had, to try and win that game for Liverpool Football Club. And he played the game like you wanted it to play. Like when you played as a kid, you didn't play the game, with the skill and knowledge of the game and tactical awareness the professionals play with, but you played with enthusiasm. And you're seeing Kevin Keegan sort of making his debut as a young lad that nobody had heard of. And as I say, he played the game with great enthusiasm and he played for the shirt. And I walked out to Anfield that day and he had a new hero. And, from then on, it was all, when we were playing in the schoolyard, it was always Kevin. Everybody, all the lads in the playground wanted to be Kevin Keegan. And, when you think the first picture we had of him was sitting on a dustbin outside Anfield, waiting to be let in to sign his contract. And, what a player he was. And you knew, as Dave said there, you knew that, going through that season and you were watching him, you knew you had something special. And, people might look at his record in that first season and say he only scored 11 goals in 42 games. You know what I mean? But it was a massive jump from the fourth division up to the first division as it was then. And for him to make that jump so quickly, it was testament to how good he was. And then, Dave, you must have been, as a young lad then, were you going to the games at Anfield?
Oh yeah, I'd been going to the games early '60s. So I was there in the Anfield Road. Didn't you remember seeing me on that day in '71? I saw you. I saw you, Les.
I probably might have done, Dave.
I'm sure you. Do you have that little red hat on and?
Yeah, I probably did. I've probably done up like I don't know what, because as I say, it was just incredible to go to the match in them days. As an 8-year-old kid, to go to Anfield to see the Reds play, it was everything.
Yeah, it was an occasion. I mean, I was a regular. By the time by '71, I was a regular in Anfield Road, and obviously, well, I'd started in the boys' pen and progressed up to the Anfield Road end, unless my dad sometimes allowed me to go into his seat in the Kemlyn Road. But no, he did. He became a hero straight away. As has been mentioned, his energy was endless. He gave every ounce, and his enthusiasm was unbelievable. I mean, I'm tempted to say at times, the odd time, it was infuriating, because once I got into the team and you got the ball, I mean, Kevin would often run close to people and take the ball off them. Sort of, he'd want it. He'd want a 2-yard pass, and I think that was a thing of taking the responsibility. Maybe things weren't happening quick enough, or in a way that he wanted it to happen. And he always wanted the ball. Maybe. I don't know what that was when I think of it. If he didn't come and take the ball off you, he must have had confidence in you that you were able to do things. But he was he was the part that he played in the side. I mean, as has been mentioned, he was the dynamo, the link between the. He didn't really play with his back to the goal. He'd go into the midfield areas, pick up the ball, start things off, then come in and link in with Tosh and Stevie Highway, Brian Hall. He had so much about his game. It was very difficult to probably define him. I mean, he was a forward player. He came to Liverpool predominantly, I gather, as a midfield. The intention was that he was going to be a midfield player, but he then sort of developed this, I suppose, like hybrid type of role of being a midfield forward, somebody who was very happy to come deep and set things off and be a part of the build up, and yet then and be the one who was scoring goals at the end. So I mean, one of the things you mentioned, you were saying about these, I don't know who was counting these assists, Les, in those days, by the way. I didn't know assists existed in those times, but Kevin, as you mentioned, he assisted goals and he made goals, and he was just everywhere, and he wanted to be a part of everything.
Yeah, Tom, it's amazing to think, isn't it? That we talked there about his first season, and then he didn't win anything. There's only 2 seasons he's never won anything: 71-72, and then 74-75. But in that first season, people who are listening to this, younger people might not realise that we could have won the league on that in that first season when Tosh had a goal disallowed at Arsenal by Roger Kirkpatrick.
Kirkpatrick, yeah.
In the mud.
In the mud, right? And and this new kid on the block, the new superstar who was coming through, he could have had another league title quite easily. When I remember on that night Wolves beat Leeds. We needed to beat Arsenal, and Derby County with the other team that could win the league, and they were on a flight to Spain on a end of season sort of trip, and won the league on a plane. And I mean, we all have a story about that, and I can remember listening to the game on the radio, sat on the top bunk with my dad in my bedroom, and the commentator Toshack scored, and we're both jumping off, and we both thought we were coming through the ceiling. And then my dad calling Roger Kirkpatrick all the bastards under the sun for disallowing the goal. But it could have been a league title in his first season, Tom, couldn't it?
Yeah, quite easily, Les. But it's funny that I was 15 at that period in my life. And you're looking for my hero had always been, as because we met him, my hero was always Roger Hunt. Then Kevin Keegan come along, and as a 15-year-old, watching this genius play football, and he was a genius. Yeah, as David said, he had everything to his game. I remember in 72-73 season when we won the league, I remember reading. I can't remember who used it, but he used a word. And I had to come back to look it up to see what it meant, and I think it describes him. So would say the mercurial Kevin Keegan, and it was during that season in 72-73 where by this stage he just went a level further up. Then he just took Liverpool from that period, and if anything was going to happen, as David said before, it would be Kevin who'd be leading the charge. If we were under pressure and we were needing a goal, he'd find a goal. If we needed something, or we needed to hold on to something, it was him who could play. He was such an intelligent footballer as well as all the other things as you talk about. The way, and I often think he's a bit overlooked when when he left in '77, and and I always think it's only these days now you look back and you think, when we're talking about it after he's gone, you do realise he genuinely was an absolute superstar. I've been lucky enough as a kid to see George Best at the end of his career. I remember watching him at Anfield as a young lad from the boys' pen, where he absolutely terrorised Liverpool. And Kevin Keegan had that ability. Everybody was afraid of what he was going to do. I think 72, 73 was the year, Les, that you started to believe this fella, was gonna take us to places that we'd never been before.
Yeah, Pete, that's right there, isn't it? What Tom said. We had this sort of young lad who come in from Scunthorpe. We'd nearly won the league in his first season. We'd gone into the following season, and he was getting better and better. And you had that belief, didn't you, that with the other players he had around him, like Stevie Highway, John Toshak, Emlyn Hughes, Tommy Smith, Clement Goal, Kelly, there was a real nucleus of the second Shankly team starting to develop. And Kevin Keegan was the catalyst to that, wasn't he? He was like the missing piece, if you like, of that team's jigsaw. He was the one who sort of took that team as an attacking force to the next level.
Yeah, it's like I say, he was just so it was just so infectious when he was on the pitch, and as well as him, obviously you've got the likes of Emlyn as well, who once again he was another one who gave us all on the pitch, and we had so many good players. I think that first game you spoke about, I was 11 that season, and I did go to a couple of games, so I did actually see Kevin play, but I didn't go to the Forest game. But yeah, it was, as I say, you were used to players sort of coming in from the lower divisions and probably, as they used to say, serve an apprenticeship in the Central League. And Kevin just came in, like you say, I think for Cali because he was injured, and he just put him in. And he'd obviously shown so much in training that they just said, just go and do your stuff, what you've been doing at Melwood, just go on the pitch and do it. And he didn't single-handedly sort of take Liverpool to another level, but his game certainly upped it. And as I say, I think even now, if it was at my age, if they'd have said come and have a game for Liverpool, Kevin Keegan's playing, I'd probably think it could beat the Wales. To be honest, he was just that sort of character. Talking about his sort of superstar status, if you want. I remember having a big poster on my bedroom wall of Kevin Keegan. It was just the right time for him. It just seemed to all fall into place. And we had some other players in that side. Don't get me wrong. There was some world class players. I do remember Roger playing, and Ian St John, and I remember the first game I went to in '67. Gordon Mills scored. So I remember some of the players, but when you look at what was around him, Steve Highway was an emerging force. And then obviously I'm looking at the next season, 72, and that's when Tosh came and he just had this understanding between them. And it was around that time you'd go to the game just in. I remember going to a game, I can't remember when it was exactly, but we lost at home to West Brom. And it was like disbelief in the crowd. Jeff Astle scored the only goal. And I was in the Annie Road with my dad. And it was like it was almost like, it'd make big news on the telly, like a headline, we've lost at home to West Brom, because you went. And it was just around that time. Merseyside was booming, with the music and the fashion and everything else. It was just a place to be. And whether you supported the blue side or the red side, it was just really, fantastic place to be. And Kevin was at the centre of that. Kevin Keegan was right at the centre of it. And as I say, it was just a fantastic time to be going to games.
Mike, I know you said earlier that you didn't go to the game or start really taking notice much of Liverpool till 74. There must have been an interest there in the, in the 72-73 season, especially as it's coming to the end of that season where Liverpool are in, for both the league and the UEFA Cup. I can remember the excitement building in. I was in primary school at the time in Tiber Street, and I can remember the excitement building amongst all the Liverpool fans who were in the school at the time, and certainly, my dad. And we'll come on in a minute to a few of the key games towards the end of that season that Kevin played a massive part in. So, you must have been, as a big red at that time, you must have been, as a young lad, taking real notice and a keen interest in what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the build up towards the UEFA Cup final in '73 certainly caught the eye. The problem you had then is it wasn't live on telly, was it?
No, right.
So they'd have I think you'd have the European Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup because they were one game. You'd probably get them live, but the UEFA Cup you didn't get live, and so it wasn't as easy to catch up. I like Pete. I lived on the Wirral at that point in time, and like Pete, I used to go. So at those times, I was going to watch Ronnie Moore playing for Tranmere on a Friday night, and then my dad would he would go at the match on a Saturday. Most Saturdays, and then very occasionally. And at that point in time, for me, it would be only if he could get stand tickets. He wouldn't take me on the Cop or on the Anfield Road end or anything like that. Eventually it was the Paddock that we'd go in, but definitely towards that UEFA Cup final. I remember I'd go to bed when they played a night match. I'd go to bed early voluntarily and listen on the transistor radio to Radio Merseyside. Get me right, is this Bob Azodia?
Bob Azodia.
Bob Azodia.
But even then, they didn't do commentary. You'd have music, and then you'd have some Stuart Staunton would go off to Chester and do the report from Chester, and then somebody would go to Tranmere, and then they go to Anfield and go, oh yeah, 20 minutes ago there was a goal. It was never quite the same thing. But I'd listen to Radio Merseyside in bed simply because it was the best place to get reception from where I lived. But you were, but it was until you started to go to Anfield regularly. But the first match that was live on TV for me was the '74 Cup final, and that after that you're gone, aren't you?
That's it, Dave. You must as a massive fan as you are, as well as a legend. You must remember that the games towards the end of that 72-73 season, especially the game against Leeds United.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, I was in the Annie Road end again that day. I remember having to queue up like about 11:30 to get in, and because there was no tickets and it wasn't all tickets. I mean, I can remember going with my mum and dad. My mum actually went to that game as well. And Kevin scores in that game, and then there was the UEFA Cup final against Borussia Mönchengladbach, the one that was rained off, and then we had to go back again the night after. So give us your memories of those two games.
Well, I went to the Leeds game, and my dad used a little bit of influence on that game because I wanted to go, and it was a huge game, the fact that we could win the league that day. My dad rang Jeff Twentyman, which the one and only time he ever did, and sort of pulled a little bit of sort of said, look, any chance you could get us 2 tickets, and Jeff duly came up with the goods. So I was very fortunate. I was in the main stand that day. I think it was Peter Cormack scored the second, didn't he? I think.
Yeah, he did.
So I remember that was amazing. Obviously, we'd had the year when Leeds had won the league, and we were very gracious in when was that before or after?
That was before.
Yeah, it was the year before.
It'd been before, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been great. So it was a huge event, and Leeds were an incredible team to play in those days. They were the biggest games of the season. Going away to Leeds and having Leeds at Anfield, they were the two biggest games of the season outside of the derby games. So it was massive, and I remember it, and it was a huge day. I mean, we talk about favourites. Emlyn was a big favourite of mine. I was a huge fan of John Toshak, actually. Whilst appreciating Kevin and him coming into the side and being one of the final parts of the jigsaw that made up that exciting '70s team, I still remain. John Toshak was my big favourite, and. So I remember that all well, and the guys mentioned the Mönchengladbach game. I remember listening to on the radio, and then ultimately it was on the telly on I don't know, it was ITV or BBC, but the highlights were on, and I just remembering how we were hanging on and having listened to one or two things off the boys in later years. I mean, they felt that they were really, really hanging on in that game. Gunter Netzer was running things. They'd come out and really sort of showed their true form. Mönchengladbach. Heinkes was at the height of his game. Netzer was a huge star in German football, and Liverpool really, really hung on. And I remember listening to it on the radio and being really, really anxious. And then ultimately, when you saw the pictures later on, it was an incredible time. I mean, we were breaking new ground all the time. Championships, European wins. Liverpool were beginning to create that dynasty that ultimately went on for a few more years later, and I was fortunate to get a piece of it. So it was a great time. I came into the club in '74, in the summer of '74, as an apprentice, and as I mentioned earlier, to be in and around all those guys. I mean, that group there were great lads all amongst them. Peter Cormack, Larry Lloyd, Callie obviously, and Smithy had come through the '60s, and it was a really, really incredible atmosphere, and the belief was there. They'd been achieving things. We were like, you were sort of part of something that was really, really special, and the thought of perhaps breaking into it never even entered into my head. I'll be honest, as an apprentice, it was still a dream. Would I ever get to play for Liverpool? But being surrounded by them daily and running errands for them and things like that. Anfield was an incredible place to be, and Shanks, exuded enthusiasm and passion, and players like Kevin, particularly Emlyn Hughes as well. They were really, they were how Bill Shankly sort of saw his footballers, who gave their all, boundless energy, and they for me were the two that really sort of did pull it all together and kind of lead in a sort of football sense. You had the bossy people around, Tommy Smith and one or two others, but the Emlyn and Kevin were great leaders on the pitch. They made the things happen.
Tom, I remember you telling me you were at that Leeds game, weren't you? I think it was the Easter Monday
2-0 game.
Yeah, that was a great occasion.
I was in the
incredible.
I was in the Kop that day, lads. Do you know what? When moments live with you in your mind, and you go back to you think of I think of 72, I think of 1970, 72, 73, think of 76 when you won, when you won the league. But ultimately, that was we had a 7-year period where we hadn't, we hadn't won the league, or Shanks had built this new side, and all of a sudden it was coming together. It's just amazing to see that. But then the Leeds game we were talking about, me and you earlier, but when Kevin gets the first, and then 4 minutes later, I think it was 4 minutes later, 4 to 5 minutes later, Cormac heads the second in, and you just the place just exploded. It was just a brilliant feeling. It just made you believe that Shanks was going to start it all over again, and we were going to go from what we'd had in the 60s to the 70s with this brilliant Liverpool side. And as David talked about before, I forgot, like people we never mentioned, hardly ever got to mention there, like as well, Stevie Highway. Stevie played an amazing part as well in the side with them. But Peter Cormack, once they made it 2-0, and against Leeds, because as David said before, Leeds were a great side. No, they were not what you would call a beautiful football side to watch, but they were a physical side who made it so difficult and so hard to beat, and they had some really good players. So to beat Leeds and then to win the league, that was just, it didn't get any better, like that was the start of it all for me.
Yeah, Pete, it was a special time, wasn't it? I mean, I don't know whether you were at that game against Leeds, but whether you were there or whether you were listening to it on the radio somewhere, that was a special day. It was a really tight game as well for a lot of it. You know what I mean? And you sort of, it was a game Liverpool needed to win, and for Kevin to get that opening goal for us. That sort of the roof come off the place.
Yeah, I actually had a listening brief again. I went down to my cousins that day, to a family of Evertonians. Would you believe we were listening to it? I've got the things up now. It says that Peter Cormack got the first goal just after half time.
It's been the other way around, yeah.
Right, and it says Kevin Keegan after 85 minutes. Maybe it was the other way around. But yeah, I was listening to it, and I remember waiting for the bus about 2:15 to go into Birkenhead. They lived downtown. I was in Rockferry, and there was a lad standing at the bus stop with all his clobber on going the game, and he said, "Are you going over the match?" And I thought, "You're not going to get in. It's about 2:15." I got down to Birkenhead to my cousins about just on kick-off time, and we were having a kickabout in the backyard, and we had the radio on. Obviously, since then you've seen like grainy sort of footage of the goals and stuff, but yeah, just fantastic especially against Leeds. I mean, some of the players they had then, Billy Bremner was still there, Norman Hunter, take no prisoners either of them. Even the likes of Paul Reaney and people at the back like that. They were classy players, but they took no prisoners at all. They win at all costs. And Peter Lorimer and stuff like that. It was always, I think, like someone mentioned earlier on, I think Dave mentioned, after the derby, they were the games you look forward to. Ellen Road away and Anfield against Leeds at home, because I remember going to a game, it must have been the season after or a couple of years after, and we started queuing up at 10:30. That's how big the games were, because it was none of this all ticket lark. If you wanted to get on the terraces, you'd have to queue up, and we went over with my mate and his dad, and it was literally, we got to Anfield about 10:30, 11:15, and I think the gates may have opened about 1:00, but that's what you had to do them days. It was always a massive game against Leeds. But yeah, once again, Kevin instrumental in it. And deservedly won the championship. I don't think we actually won it that day. I think it was rubber stamped against Leicester, wasn't it, Les?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we need some points.
Draw,
it was we virtually got it over the line.
Yeah.
But it wasn't actually rubber stamped till the Leicester game when we got a 0-0 draw at home, which we've spoken about on previous pods, because was it Stringfellow nearly?
Yeah, mate, you've just made me dad sort of shiver up above, Pete. That fella's name used to send shivers down his spine, I tell you. And honestly, I've told this story on the podcast before, but on that game against Leicester, Stringfellow was sub. And when he heard my dad heard the team announced and he was sub, my dad was just praying that if he did come on, Liverpool were about 2 or 3 goals ahead. Because every time he actually played against Liverpool, he scored. And when he actually come on, it was 0-0 because the game finished 0-0. Obviously, he comes on in the second half, And my mum actually thought my dad was going to have a heart attack when he was coming because he was just panicking and going mad. Oh no, they're putting a string fellow on. He's going to score and he's going to take the league off us. And bloody hell, he did score, and it was offside. It was offside, and as soon as the ball hit the net, my dad said, I told you, that Getz has done it again. That Getz has done it again. And then he's seen the linesman's flag up. And my mum saying to him, Eddie, will you calm down? Will you calm down? And he said, I can't calm down with him on the pitch. And honest to God, she said, you're going to have a bloody heart attack if you carry on. And my dad just, because I think from the 60s, he always used to score against us. We got over the line and won the league. And obviously then, we'd won the league and the UEFA Cup. Mike, for you, that must have been, again, the first experience you'd had, even as a young boy not being there, of your team winning the league. And also, for any of us, the first time we'd won a European trophy.
Yeah, I do remember listening to the Leeds game, and Pete's right. I've just checked my my Liverpool anthology, and
well done.
Cormac scored after 47, and I remember the Keegan goal right at the end because the ball went across and Sprake dropped it, didn't he? And
it was David Harvey.
Was it David Harvey? Yeah. And he kind of went round him and put it in. Yeah, you could feel it building up, couldn't you? But it's like I say, it's very difficult. I mean, if you're not going the game and you rarely got a full recording, a full commentary on the radio those days, it's really hard. I used to get the Echo. I used to read the Echo, sports part of the Echo, the old pink Echo. A football one, but it was hard to keep in touch. But I mean, those there's some famous scenes when they won it in '73 on the pitch, and with Shankly being mobbed, and it's the first time I remember us winning the league, that one, and it was great. It was great, and it was just the start. Like I said, it's next year that was the big one for me, getting into it, but it was the start. It was fantastic.
Dave, in 73, 74, were you obviously you must have been getting looked at then by Liverpool as well as a school.
Oh yeah, I'd signed as a schoolboy in 1970, so I was that basically the terms of those contracts then were that when you left school, then Liverpool, they had to offer you either an apprenticeship or release you from that form. So, but I knew that Liverpool wants to sign me that summer. I was 15 and a half. I went to a grammar school where they poo-pooed the idea, told my dad there's absolutely no one leaves this school at 15 and a half because that wasn't what you were there for. It was very academic based. So reluctantly, my dad sensibly told Liverpool, no, he can't sign on this year. He said, see how it goes next year. And Tom Saunders said, I remember him saying at the time, he said, don't worry, there'll be the same offer will be there next year. So I was very much in the, I was there or thereabouts. A couple of my mates, Max Thompson, he signed as an apprentice in that summer. And I think Jeff Ainsworth did as well, but they were at schools that allowed them to leave a little bit earlier. But I had to wait another year. I was a bit, I was disappointed, and it kind of affected probably my results over the following 12 months, but knowing that I was still going to go to Liverpool, and I didn't probably give the lessons probably as much consideration as I should have done, but
as I say, Dave, I don't know whether you remember that. it's another game you think about. Liverpool winning the cup that year, but we were so close to going out in the third round at home to Doncaster, weren't we?
Yes, yeah.
We went 1-0 up early doors, and I think Kevin again equalised against Doncaster.
Well, I think you're growing up in those times. I mean, the FA Cup it wasn't the be all and end all, but it was pretty much close to that. I mean, you wanted a run of the FA Cup, didn't you? Because you wanted to be a part of cup final day and all the excitement and everything that went with it, the way that TV covered it and everything made it such a special day. And to go out of the cup in the early rounds was an absolute nightmare. Experienced it obviously as a player, but as a supporter in those days, yeah, it was devastating, wasn't it? If you went out the cup early on, you went in with so much hope. You started it with so much hope in January. You didn't want to go out in the early rounds. Yeah, it's funny how you know now we know about players playing too much, maybe too many games and all those type of things. I think sometimes those little surprises, those stumbles that we had against lesser teams, I think you can put down to a little bit of sort of tiredness. I think it's an obvious I don't know. I think it's an obvious assumption to make that sometimes the boys just weren't able to sustain that sort of Liverpool style, sort of week after week, 60 games a year, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
They didn't have the squad numbers either then, Dave, to
No,
be honest.
no. I mean,
14 players probably over the season.
yeah, Liverpool were very well. Shanks and Bob Paisley after him were both very set in their ways, and they had this trust in a small group of players, and it didn't extend to too many. I mean, you know, we know through that period, you see the players that played. Very few sort of really, you know, were featuring. It was same names week after week, and you know, the odd, you know, the ones who were like maybe 12th, 13th man were always the same people. Strange, but they were very, very set in their ways. You know, Shanks and Bob Paisley.
Yeah, there was a centre half played that day against Doncaster, Dave, and he I think he got blamed for the 2 goals. Never played for Liverpool again. Do you remember Dave Rylands?
Oh, Dave Rylands, bloody hell, remember the Rilo, yeah.
Oh,
Big
that's a
lad,
name
yeah.
for the past, lads.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
Oh.
yeah, Rilo, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
do you remember?
to go to the semi-finals against Leicester or the final against Newcastle, Dave?
Yeah, I was there at both. Yeah, went to the replay at Villa Park. Remember the excitement and, you know, Tosh scoring at the end, and yeah, that was an incredible night. We all went down on a coach, the apprentices, and the young pros rather, and yeah, and I was fortunate enough to be in the group that went to the cup final. Went on the Friday, had all the. That was my first real experience of being treated like special. We stayed in the where we were in the we were in the Savoy, but we were around the corner from the Savoy, and God, it was big time. It was amazing. Went to the cup final reception which was in the Savoy. First team stayed in there, and I think I got very drunk on wine. Not. I didn't. I wasn't that aware that. Well, as the waiters were going around pouring wine, you put your hand over the top of the glass if you didn't want any. I was just, you know, just drinking the all. It went to my head very early on. I remember being very embarrassed on that night. But a great, you know, massive. Exciting time. I mean, and after that cup final, Max Thompson Liverpool had one game to play away at Tottenham, and Max, who was my big pal, made his debut, didn't he, as a 16-year-old? He was only 16 and a half against Tottenham on the weekend after. Yeah, no, it's all very, very. There in the front of my mind, you know, bringing back all these memories, Les. It's incredible.
Yeah, as I say, it's great when you talk about, you know, these great games of the past, because it shows you how lucky we've been to follow such a fantastic team. And Tom, you know, just going back to that semi-final, you know, the goal that Kevin scored,
Unbelievable.
Peter Shilton. Do you remember Peter Shilton wore an all-white goal?
Yeah.
Do you know what? That was an amazing experience. That was probably his finest goal. That is, I think. You know, like you talk about, you know, some of the great goals he scored, but to chip it well, it wasn't a chip, it was a half volley, wasn't it? But like to drop it over his head and leave him stranded. It was just an incredible goal. And that was a tight game as well. Even though they scored a 3-1, we had enough chances, but like they were still there. I think Weller was playing for them at the time, wasn't he, David? Do you remember?
Yeah, they were very dogged, Leicester. You know, as you
Yeah.
mentioned Leicester before, they just always were difficult for us.
Oh God.
And
Bogey
you
side,
know,
weren't they?
it was 1-1 for a long time, I think, in that game, if memory. It was the second half. Obviously, Kevin gets the goal on the down on the big, the big Holt end, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then Tosh gets the one that ultimately it was a bit scrappy, but ultimately once he got the third, we knew we were there, weren't we? And on our way to Wembley, song ringing out. You know, it was an incredible night.
That's where me and Peter went to, not together, but for that was our first final. I went to the semi-final in 71, missed out in 71, and got a ticket for 74. That was just an incredible final. And that again, like I still moan to this day. Everybody, like when we'll talk about Kevin's great goal, but how he ruled out Alex Lindsay's goal, I'd never know.
I know. Poor Alec was going through a divorce at the time, and he desperately needed a little bit of a lift, and that would have been so good for Alec on a personal note as much as anything else. But I think that's one of those decisions down the years has still baffled people. I don't think it was ever really explained why it was disallowed.
Just incredible goal, and you just accepted it. Like we've had this discussion. I think Mike said it was offside or whatever. I don't know what.
No, they gave it because Keegan was supposedly offside, and yet it came off the defender. It came off
one of their players.
So it's kind of illogical. The inner workings of Gordon Q's mind.
Yeah, but the final that was just a spectacle. After we got the first and then the second, it turned into a spectacle. Absolutely amazing. But as Peter will tell you, it's exactly the same. Your first FA Cup, your first experience of Wembley is brilliant when you're walking up toward it. There's not like it. The towers just coming in. It's just incredible.
It wasn't long after winning the World Cup, was it?
It was a little bit different, Peter.
Yeah, it wasn't so long after England won the World Cup there. It was what,
8 years, yeah.
I'll drop in and say my first visit was for the World Cup final in 1966 as a 9-year-old. As a 9-year-old, I was there.
Wow, brilliant!
Yeah,
wow. Brilliant.
Yeah, I tell you what, Dave, your old man had some contacts to tell you to get tickets for that.
No, I won a competition. It was all down to me. That.
Nice.
What an experience!
It's a good story. It's a good story, but that was special. So going there for an FA Cup final. I didn't go for 71. I remember watching it on the television. I get losing against Arsenal, but I was there for 74. But it hadn't been the first time that I'd been.
I was starting to go to the game more regularly with the lads from school then. Always remember, my mum used to say, you can go to the game, but you're not going on the cop, because she used to see the cop on the telly, and it was just mayhem, wasn't it? So we went the road end, and I didn't like saying to her, it was a bit naughty sometimes in the road end when Leeds were down and Man U and that. But I think it's a game you mentioned earlier on QPR when Alec Lindsay scored the penalty early.
Yeah, that was my first game.
Was that yours, Mike? Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
And they gave vouchers out that day for the cup final. And I've told this story before, but I just remember taking this voucher over, and it said, keep hold of it, and there'll be an announcement in the Echo. And a few days later, my dad comes walking up our road, waving the Echo. You've got a ticket. Oh. So he took me down to Wembley, because I'd never been to an away game before. I'd only ever been to Anfield. And he took me down and waited outside for me. So yeah, it was like you say, it was just magical walking down Wembley Way, and then obviously, Kevin scores the 2 goals, and it was just a fantastic day, and one that lived long in the memory. And I could probably talk for hours on it, some of the things that we got up to down there, and the train home that we bunked on, and everything else. But just a fantastic thing, and just as I say, it was only 8 years after the World Cup final, and that's when I sort of fell in love with football that summer. When the World Cup was on, I used to watch all the games and stuff, and that's when my love affair with football started, really. And then '67 was my first match at Anfield.
Mike, I mean, you must have been like the rest of us, apart from, Tom, Pete and Dave, we were all down there. But as a young lad, I was watching it on the telly. Dave mentioned there before, about, the semi-final at Villa Park. It's amazing the things that stick in your mind. You and Pete mentioned before about listening to games on the radio. And I think, I don't know whether it was either Peter Jones or Brian Butler was doing the commentary on the semi-final, and you're listening to it, and he says, I can still remember his commentary now, and he says something like, as I speak, Kevin Keegan has just hammered the ball into the back of the Leicester City net. It's Liverpool 2, Leicester City 1. And I can just remember like running around the living room and jumping up into my dad's arms, and then you could hear as Dave said, you could hear the Liverpool fans singing, let's all go to Wembley, let's all go to Wembley, na 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 na. And then obviously then, the build-up comes to the cup final, and you're going round and you're seeing all the houses done up in red and white with pictures of the players in the window, and you're getting up bright and early, and to watch the build-up on the day, and then Kevin scores 2. For me to see Liverpool win the FA Cup. I mean, I was 1 in 1965, just before my second birthday, so I don't really remember it. I've seen it all since and learned all about it. But to actually be here with my mum, my dad, my best mate Docker, my auntie and uncle were here as well, and to see Liverpool win the cup and Kevin score 2, it was my hero at the time. It was an amazing day.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many memories. It's amazing how the first really big memory of a match sticks in your head. So there's a number of things. So Malcolm McDonald had been giving it the big I am all the way in the build-up of that. And there's 2 bits. So the radio commentary was a bloke called Maurice Evelston, who used to do the commentary. And there's 2 things I remember him saying when... There was a point where McDonald was clean through and he blasted it over the bar, and they said he's not really Supermac, he's more Pacamac. And then when Kevin scored the winner, because it was billed as a Keegan versus McDonald shootout, and it wasn't even close. And at the end, he said Keegan 2, Highway 1, Liverpool 3, Newcastle none.
Yeah,
and that sticks in your mind. But it was he just ran that game. It was a very, very close first half, wasn't it? I seem to remember, did Emlyn Hughes have one he blasted over the bar or something?
Just missed. Yeah, it just missed.
Yeah, it was. So it was quite a close first half, and 52 minutes. Well, it's probably 49 minutes. Alec Lindsay scores that goal. We're up bouncing around, and again. My dad had this thing where he would listen to the radio commentary and put the telly on. And I remember Maurice Evelston said, "Oh, that might be a non-goal."
A non-goal.
It's just a weird thing to say, but it sticks in your mind. And then when there's the famous, I can't remember, is it David Cole and goals came and went, but Keegan does his share or something like that when he scored the first one. But it was just one-way traffic from that, and you would just get more and more and more excited. And those are the days. I think I watched it with my mate, and at the end of the game, we just ran around the streets with our Liverpool scarves, and we were in Liverpool, but we were just running around the streets. It was just fantastic. Loved it. One of my favourite games of all time.
Remember the Liverpool fans singing Supermouth?
Yeah,
Supermouth, because he'd actually, like I said, what he wasn't going to do to us on that day.
Oh yeah,
and I remember watching the programme the night before, who'll win the cup, and I can't remember who the panel were, but certainly Jackie Charlton was on, because we were getting the midnight train from Lime Street, so it was like on at 10:30, 11 o'clock. Anyway, we watched that and then got the train, and I always remember Jackie Charlton saying, "My heart says Newcastle, but my head says Liverpool." I always remember him saying that.
Wow.
Yeah, so
I remember, the Liverpool fans singing when he. I think it was when he skied that shot over in the
Yeah.
yeah, so then something happened then on the 12th of July that might have sort of made the news a little bit, Dave, and I think it really shaped Kevin's thinking about his future really when Bill Shankly resigned, because Kevin openly speaks, doesn't he, about how much Shanks meant to him, and I don't think that if Shanks had stayed as Liverpool manager, I don't think Kevin Keegan would have left, but that changed that sort of changed, I think, his thinking in the long term. But then at the Shanks' last game in charge, obviously in the Charity Shield in 1974, Kevin got sent off with Billy Bremner, and it was really unfortunate because if the referee had done his job, Johnny Giles should have been sent off, and the Keegan Bremner thing would never have happened.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an unfortunate. I mean, that was un-Kevin Keegan like, wasn't it? And he said later on, he took his shirt off as well, and he didn't know why. And I mean, obviously, getting involved in the little fracas he would have got a punishment, but taking the shirt off sort of made it look a whole lot worse. And he did say that he didn't know why he did it. Billy Bremner did it, and he just thought, well, I'll do it as well. It was kind of tit for tat, and it didn't do him any favors because obviously, the ban was increased because of all that.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. I mean, when you look at that, Johnny Giles gave him a right decent right hook and floored him, didn't he?
Yeah.
It was a real, I mean, it was a real poor decision by the referee that day. And that's not sort of being biased in any way. But the whole incident with Bremner was caused because of the referee didn't control the game properly. It was a hell of a right hook that Kevin took, and it laid him out.
It did, yeah. And do you know what? He totally reacted to that, Les, didn't he? And then Bremner got involved. And then, but as you say, we had this discussion earlier on today, and what you were talking about, we were talking about Bremner and Giles and what we were saying about before. That ended up costing him. Was it an 8-game? Was it an 8-game?
I think it was, yeah.
Like an 8-game ban, which was unheard of. And as you pointed out, we only lost the league by a couple of points that season. Yeah. And he never played, so it turned out to be. But we had what we were saying earlier on when we had the conversation. I think that played a major part, Shanks leaving, at that stage, because he was a father-like figure, and it makes you wonder what impact it had on him. Before and then going into that game, but that was a costly thing for us. And looking back on it, Giles walked away scot-free. It caused it all the problems. Walks away from it, doesn't get a ban, but Kevin's taken out.
Yeah,
as he had a clever knack, Johnny Giles. I think he was. It wouldn't have been the first time he'd really been the kind of the incendiary of a number of things that went on in their games.
I think people thought because he was a diminutive player, he was quite small, wasn't he? But he could dish it out, Johnny Giles. I
remember at a game at Anfield, I was saying he got bent over the bar in the semi-final against Leeds of the Europa League. And it was the Intercity First Cup. That's it had a name. But I remember Giles that night. We got beat 1-0, diving header by Bremner, 1-0, and Giles was absolutely filthy. He booted everything all night. He was screaming. On the car, people were screaming at the referee to do something about it, but. He was just one of them players, horrible player to watch, but probably a brilliant. He was a brilliant footballer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pete. It was, that season was, only the second season where we didn't win anything when Kevin was in the team, and as Tom said there, it was a case of you wonder, don't you, how costly that 8-game ban was at the start of the season. If he hadn't been sent off, if the referee had done his job in the Charity Shield, and that was I think what made it worse was that was the first Charity Shield at Wembley, wasn't it? It was the first Charity Shield at Wembley, and I think that Keegan and Bremner were the first players to be sent off at Wembley as well. So it was frowned upon, wasn't it? You know what I mean? By we've got to give them a big ban. You know what I mean? And boy, did they get it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking at the results, to be honest. We didn't lose our first game in any competition until 14th of September, which was Man City away. So although he was banned for a few games, we predominantly won most of them.
Bill Borsma started scoring goals.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
we drew with Molineux at 0-0, but we beat Leicester, Wolves, Chelsea, Tottenham. Even though as I say, he was missing. But yeah, it certainly would have had some impact. But like you say, it was probably the most high-profile Charity Shield ever because it was staged at Wembley. And I don't know, they always used to say about the Charity Shield, it's just a friendly. And obviously that there was no such thing as a friendly when you played Leeds United, was there?
It was Brian Clough's first game. It was Brian Clough's first game, wasn't it, as well? So.
Yeah.
So it was very high profile.
Yeah, it was. And Mikey, again, you look back now and you think, wow, an 8-game ban was really, really harsh, but it was really frowned upon because it was at Wembley that they got sent off, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it? You get a 3-game ban extended to an 8-game ban for taking your shirt off. Now you just get a yellow card for it, don't you? I mean,
that's right. Yeah,
it's a bit strange. It was a very strange reaction. Kind of, I could see them, getting even a longer ban than that. But I thought the kind of the idea of the shirt thing was probably something like it was disrespectful to the club. It was seen as disrespectful to the club. So the club should have dealt with that. Shouldn't have been dealt with beyond that. It was a bit weird. I mean, Pete's right. We lost one game, but all the rest were wins right up until then. They had 2 games. They lost to Burnley and Sheffield United, and things started to come crashing down. There was obviously one during that ban. They beat Stromsgodset 11-0.
Yeah.
Which happens to be my first European game as well. But yeah, I mean, any team that doesn't have Kevin Keegan in is going to be weaker, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So we then go on to season 75-76, which was a special year for you, Dave, because you made your Liverpool debut that year, and I think you come on the scene, and took it by storm, and I think as well, how big of an impact, or how helpful, should I say, was the likes of Kevin Keegan to you when you sort of started joining in with the first team training and then got become part of the first team squad?
And, I've said this before down the years. I don't think I have no real memories of people taking you aside and giving you any help with your football so much. He was helpful aside from the football. In for my debut, I roomed with Joey Jones. The next time I was with the first team, we were away at Sheffield United. It was December, first week of December, I think, and I was sub, and I was rooming with Kevin because Kevin. I was saying this to somebody yesterday. Kevin's usual roommate used to be Peter Cormack, so once Peter then left the group kind of thing, he started to lose his place. Kevin was a floater, let's say. So I was put with Kevin, and you know, he made me a cup of tea and he ran me he ran me a bath, and then I thought, well, this is great, and I'm really, you know, I said I had this. I was kind of overawed in a fashion, but the next morning when you get up and he tells all the lads, you know, oh, he's a big time thingy here. He sits back, lets me make his tea, lets me run his bath and all that type of stuff. And I'm thinking, you know, it's just banter, and it obviously it integrates you into the group, and but taking the mickey out of me soundly because, but you know, you look upon it, looking at another way, you think Kevin Keegan making me a cup of tea, you know, sort of like, and actually then saying, you know, about running your bath, how much hot water do you want it, and all this type of stuff. You think to yourself, how lucky was I? You know, that was how many people would have loved to have been in that position. And is as I say, his little way of getting me back was to tell all the boys and sort of say I was a big timer. So that was a great help in a sense, you know, being around him and ask him a few questions. No, never about football actually. Remember one time we were in London and we were playing Tottenham, and Kevin needed to go for a shirt, so we went over the road to Harrods, and we were walking there, and I was kind of just a step behind him. I was just watching people's reaction as he walked past because he was a big international player at that point, and he was well known, and this had come out about in the conversation that he said, you know, you've made it when you're being recognised outside of your home city, you know, like, and particularly in somewhere like London, and then on this occasion I was able to be close at hand and experience that and see that, you know, people certainly knew who he was as he walked through the halls of Harrods. So he was a help. I remember asking him about sort of a couple of legal things, a couple of things that they helped across, you know, along, you know, that you needed along the way, about, you know, an accountant and a couple of other little things. I thought, well, if Kevin Keegan's using so and so as an accountant, I'll use him as my accountant, and one thing or another, and you know, so they were good in that sense. But I have no real memories of the lads as I'm breaking into the team. Nobody kind of helps you. I mean, I had a couple of people probably who were, you know, were sort of disappointed that I was in the team. People like Phil Boersma, one or two others. I mean, who were vying for those, you know, the extra sort of, like, outside of the 11 players. There was a couple of in the squad. So there were a few people that resented you in there. So you know. It sounds horrible, but I think everybody, you once you're in there, you got to look after yourself. You know, it's up to you. You've got to sort of stand on your own 2 feet. And there's no point in going and asking for, you know, what should I be doing in this situation or that situation. You know, sink or swim, really. I don't know if that sounds.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's what you have to do, and it shows you've got the bottle for the fight as well when you have to do that, Tom. But that was again, wasn't it? You know, another season that went right down to the wire, wasn't it? More so than any of the others, really.
Oh.
You know what I mean? And you know, David played a massive part towards the end of the season. We'll talk to him about that as well, you know, in a little bit. But towards the end of that season, you know, David was the trump card, if you like, that sort of got Liverpool over the line and sort of won them the league. But as I say, there was the run in the UEFA Cup, wasn't it? That, you know, we actually won at Barcelona when Tosh scored, and you know, if rounded off with, you know, the win at Wolves, and Kevin again was instrumental. He got the equalising goal against Wolves that night. Then he scores in both legs at the final against Bruges. So, you know, and in that season, he scored 16 goals. You know what I mean? And it's, you know, again, another season where he wins a double.
Yeah, that was the ends of that season was incredible. Do you know, I was fortunate enough to go in '76. Told this story many times on the podcast. Over probably, you know, we always talk about the league that you won, and of course that probably got surpassed when we won it this year. But like, when we won away at Wolves, that was just the most amazing. It was in the middle of a heat wave. just everything about the season. Just the way we come late, the way we come back into the game. Kingdom puts them 1-0 up, and then like there was that many people in the ground. Like they were spilling over onto all sides of the ground. And when Kevin scored to make it 1-1. And then you believe then. Well, you're always. It's funny. It's funny as a youngster, as a young person. You always believe you're going to win anyhow. That belief is in you. But as you get older, that belief it wanes a little bit. You have doubts about things. But once he scored to make it 1-1, you were never in doubt Liverpool were going to win the league that day. To Bruges. They're probably one of only a few times that in my life I've ever been in the main stand. I've spent my whole life in the Kop, but I went in the main stand. Funny enough, twice in a season. In that season, once when David scored against Everton when he won 1-0, when he decided to take everybody on and bury it. And the other time was against Bruges with my Uncle Ted's ticket. And when Clem played in a yellow shirt against Bruges, and we were 2 goals down after about 12 minutes, you just thought, I probably got the times wrong. We were 2 goals down very quickly. But like just sitting there, couldn't believe what you were watching. And then again, we come back, Kevin leads the way, and we end up, coming back and winning that game 3-2. And then going on to win going on to hold on, and and winning away. Just an end to a perfect season. And again, as you said, Kevin was the catalyst in the end towards the end of the season. Although, to be fair, David, you did play a major part.
Yeah, Pete, it was amazing, wasn't it? You're at Wolves, I'm at Wolves. And I'll tell my little story a minute, which I've told before many a time. But it always makes me laugh that you never actually got in that night.
Yeah, I wasn't laughing, Les, to be honest. Because we had to wait for one of the lads who had an exam, and it wasn't finishing until 4 o'clock. So we're all standing outside the school waiting for him, and his dad's waiting with the change of clothes. And we get down, we're going down, and I think there was that many Scousers went down there that day. It was just great. It was gridlock. So Jim Milton, the daddy, decided to go down the A41. And we were doing really well till about 5 or 6 miles outside of Wolverhampton, a place called Newport, I think. And it was just gridlock. So he said, right, I think we were a couple of miles away when he decided to park up the car on a side street. It was like in the country, to be honest. It was like a little wooded area. So he said, we'll see you back here. And we walked up. A place, always remember the name, Tettenhall Road it was. And all the locals were out on the doorstep. They'd not seen anything like it. The amount of Liverpool fans. But I unfortunately didn't get in. So I sort of moseyed around the first half outside the ground. A gate went down and I managed to get in, and the busy picked on me to throw out. I was one of the people who got in, he picked on me. So I thought, I'll give it up. So I started walking back to the car, and there was a park and these kids were playing football there, and I said, what's the score? They had a radio. He said, the Wolves are still winning 1-0, and I thought, it's getting late now. We've lost it here. So I got back to the car, and there was another lad with me, who not with us, but they'd parked close by, and he was in the same boat. And we saw the coaches starting to file past, and everyone looked drained on the coach. Everyone looked absolutely, and we said, they've lost here. They've lost. Anyway, my mates, a few minutes later, my mates come up waving the scarves, and that. We won. So we had a good journey back, but unfortunately I got locked out and didn't see a kick, to be honest.
Mike, what's your memories of that night against Wolves, and also the Bruges game, or the 2 games against Bruges?
So, same as I've said before, on the bed with Bob Azonia for the Wolves game, although I think they had live commentary on that one. on Radio 2. It would have been, wouldn't it then? So I do remember. I do remember the famous commentary on John Toshak's goal, because he said Toshak turns, can't get his shot in. He can get his shot in. He's got it into the back of the Wolverhampton Wanderers net, and that was the one to go 2-up. But it was just an amazing night, wasn't it? It was just screaming my head off at that one. Oh, fantastic! And my dad went to the final of the Bruges home game 3-2, and again I had to listen to that on the radio. But you know, I was young enough to be really, really almost in tears when we were 2-0 down, and then to see that the way that they all came together and come back with Kennedy and Case, and then Kevin scored a penalty to go 3-2 up. That was fantastic. And then Kevin got the equaliser in the away leg, didn't he? From a little sideways pass from Emlyn. My two heroes of the 70s. My two first heroes of the 70s.
Just quickly, the second leg, the away leg, the goals were pretty early. Both goals, weren't they? They scored early, a penalty, and then, like Mike said, Emlyn teed it up for Kevin. But you came on just after an hour. Was it really backs to the wall stuff, or had they blown out by then? You came on.
I came on, and Bob Paisley said to me, I think they felt they were well. He said we were getting penned in. And he went on with me and just said, run them the other way. And I just remember having to go on, and so that obviously backs to the wall, get the ball up the field, and for me to run after them and run after it and just sort of stretch them, sort of make sure that they weren't attacking as a 10 rather than, so they have to hold a couple of people back and just occupy them a little bit. And that was a very simple sort of order. So it was disappointing not to start, because I'd started the first leg. But as I've been told down the years, sort of like sometimes Bob did think of it. It mightn't have appeared like it, but he did use it as a 12-man game, knowing that he was going to sort of bring me on later. So it would have helped if he'd have told me a little bit more. But I only learned that in the years that followed. But it was great to be a part of it, and certainly it's a big old pitch at Bruges, and it was great to obviously play my little bit and ultimately walk off with the UEFA Cup. It was a fantastic memory.
Yeah, well, going back to Wolves, and I've told this story many times. In that, I'm in school one day, and in the week leading up to the Wolves game, and as Pete said, and everybody was going to that game. I'd never been to an away game before, outside of the city, and the maths teacher just said to me one day, "Oh, this day, and are you going to Wolves on?" I think it was a Tuesday night, if I remember right, wasn't it, Pete? I'm sure it was a Tuesday.
Definitely midweek, yeah.
Yeah. You going to Wolves? And I said, no. My dad can't go, and my mum and dad won't let me go with my mates. He said, there's a space in my car if you want to come, if they'll let you go. So he comes over to my mum and said, can I go to Wolves? He said, who are you going with? The teacher from school? Well, yeah, you can go. Just imagine that now. And I was 12. You know what I mean? And there's me going down to Wolves in the battered car that the teacher had, and getting there really early, after to take half a day off school and then the next day off because the teacher was bunking off as well. and as I say, and he because he said to me, if your mum, you're gonna have to get a note off your mum to get off half a day from school. He said, and then you've got to have to tell your mum she's got to give you a note the next day off sick, because I won't be coming into work. You know what I mean? Whatever happens. So I said, oh, okay. So that's what happened. And it was just an amazing experience. I mean, it was dangerous in there. Don't get me wrong. There was, the away end was so packed. And as I say, I like Pete, Steve Kindon scored quite early, and the longer the game went on, you didn't think you were going to get back in the game. And then obviously, once Kevin scored, you knew then that it was all over. And and then when Ray Kennedy got the second, you definitely knew it was over, because I think we only needed the point. And then the scenes on the motorway going on when everybody was doing the conga down the hard shoulder because there was the motorway was blocked. Yeah, but Dave, am I right in saying? I'm sure I am. And that you were subbed that night. You needed to come on to qualify for a medal, didn't you?
Yeah, I would have qualified for. So I needed to. I mean, it was getting the last I had to play in the last 9 games or so I had to play in every game to get a medal. But I mean, he needed me anyway because it was nil. They were 1 down, so something had to happen. So he didn't throw me on as a mark of generosity. It was, it was go on there and sort of see if you can change something. It was spectacular, Wolves. I mean, people talk about things down the years. I think you're very fortunate if you were at Wolves because you wouldn't have seen any, unless you were there at the 1923 FA Cup final. Nothing matches up to it. It was just unbelievable, and everything about the night so vivid in my mind. The stories have been told, down the years, but I mean, still and all, I can still picture it now. It was just unbeatable, and for me to win the league championship in my first season, when we know that there have been other players down the years who were never fortunate enough to get one. It's fantastic. People like Jimmy Case got his first medal, Joey Jones, Phil Neal, myself. It was it was kind of Bob Paisley sort of building this new team. So I remember I was talking to Phil Neal a few months ago, and there's a picture of us in the dressing room, and I said to Phil, I said, "Can you ever remember being happier than you were at that moment?" I mean, it was just unforgettable. And everybody who was there, the players, we've talked about it many, many times down the years. It was a huge moment, I think, in modern Liverpool history.
Well, it was, Dave, because if you think about it, that was Bob Paisley's second season in charge, and he needed to win something. I think if he hadn't won a trophy that year, he might not have carried on because he'd have been under pressure. And I think he might have thought, right, I've had 2 years in charge now and not won anything. So, he might have stepped aside, and then who knows what would have happened. So you're right, it was like a pivotal season. And as I said before, I've got to cover this because obviously, this is about Kevin, but Kevin would admit, it's all about the team, and he had a really good team around him. And I think that the title race turned in Liverpool's favour when you scored that goal against Everton, and then I think it was the Easter Monday,
City.
Then scored 2 against Manchester City.
I mean, I was very fortunate. I mean, I scored my first league goal against Norwich away, and I was rooming with Kevin Keegan at that time, and that day we were going to the airport. We used to fly to Norwich, and that day Kevin he's going to give me a lift to the airport and to Liverpool Airport, and so we're hanging around. Anyway, he can't find his keys. So nowhere to be found, one thing or another. So he rings his wife, Jean, tells her, can't find me keys, whatever. Got to get to Liverpool Airport. So she brings her car up to Anfield, and me and him go to Liverpool Airport in his wife's car. So his keys are not. He still hasn't found his. He thinks, well, what are we going to do with no keys, kind of thing. So he's got a sports car. He used to have a 260 Z Datsun sporty thing, real lovely big sports car. And it was in the it had to be left in the car park. Later in that evening, she rings him. We're in the bedroom in Norwich in the hotel, and tells him, he said, "Found your keys." One of the apprentices at the time had had taken the keys, hidden them, and so when Kevin left, then he drove, and he was found driving the car down Prescott Road. Honestly,
Oh, God.
yeah. He said, he pulled up and said, "Who's this car?" And he said, "Oh, kind of." He found it hard to say it was his own, and yeah. And we took the phone call, and Kevin repeated. I was next to him as he took the phone call from his wife. So we got the keys. He said, "You'll never guess." And that guy was duly sacked, actually. It wasn't the first time, or it wasn't the other thing that they'd found out that he'd sort of been playing games with, So
God.
yeah, and
So,
I scored my first league goal then at Norwich, so I remember that all sort of so vividly. So we won 1-0. The following week we played Burnley at home. I was sub, came on for Stevie Highway and scored 2. We won 2-0, didn't we? So.
yeah, right.
That sort of started that period that we finished that season, and it was like you get into the final weeks, and suddenly I think we found that we were in a title race. I think certainly in the earlier weeks, I didn't have any recollection that like we were up for winning the league. It wasn't until sort of we went on this great run and get to the last couple of games saying, look, we could win. We could win this. It was an incredible season.
Yeah, it was, and then we come on to Kevin's final season. And one thing I want to ask you, Dave, just before we sort of start to look at that final season of Kevin at Liverpool. I remember being absolutely devastated when it was announced at the start of the season that Kevin was going to be leaving at the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
How did he break that news to the players, and how did the players feel about it? Did they try and talk him out of it, or once Kevin had made his mind up, was that it basically?
Well, I think from my memory, I think he just he announced it, and we found out like everybody else found out that he was going to leave. Maybe he might have spoken to Emlyn or somebody like that. I don't know, and it's never been repeated that that he can find it in other players. It was just announced, and I've said, I mean, few people. I think players were kind of envious that he was able to sort of leave Liverpool. Not that it was in anybody's. It would have been in anybody's mind really to leave Liverpool. Liverpool was the greatest place to be in most people's eyes, certainly mine. But the thought that he had enough control and enough sort of standing within the club and within football that he could actually make up his mind what he was going to do, so that in 9 months' time, no one had ever had that sort of strength, and nobody had ever exerted that kind of control over future. So the play, there was no envy in a bad way. The players just accepted it. Footballers do actually in most cases. They don't sort of. I don't think it would be normal for them to sort of to think untoward, but. But then the fans didn't like it, did they? The news breaks, the fans hear about it. How can he be leaving us? How can he be leaving Liverpool? I mean, and I remember, I don't know whether any of you guys remember, the booing. People made it known that they weren't happy about him saying that he was going to leave. And for that year, he wasn't the favourite. He wasn't flavour of the month week in, week out.
Can I just add to what David just said? Because I went to a QA thing with Kevin Keegan a couple of years ago at the Blackstock, the hot comedy club.
Mm.
And I got invited by me daughter's father-in-law. He had a spare ticket and he asked me to go along. And Kevin told a story about the way he left Liverpool. And I think he'd always sort of had it in his mind that at some stage he'd like to, for want of a better phrase, have a new challenge, which seems to be the thing. But the way he told it, he said at the end of the '75, the end of the '75 season, '76. Mr. Smith, the chairman, said, We've had a bid of 500,000 from Barcelona. Would you be interested in going, Kevin? And he said, well, yeah, I would actually, Mr. Smith. He said, well, we're not letting you go. But Mr. Smith, the chairman said, will you stay another season? And if anyone honors, if anyone at the end of this coming season at 76, 77, if anyone comes in with a bid that matches the 500,000, we'll honour it for you. And eventually it happened with Hamburg, who came in with that money. Barcelona never came back in for him. So that's how he ended up going to Hamburg. He sort of said...
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was kind of manipulated by, at the time, Kevin had an agent called Harry Swales, who had been, he'd looked after George Best. And at one time, he used to look after us all as a team group. And then he then told us that he was kind of leaving us and he was concentrating on things with Kevin. So I wouldn't sort of... I wouldn't have been surprised if they've manoeuvred, behind the scenes, sort of contacted clubs and sort of found. But I mean,
that's just how Kevin told it, and he said, I was quite happy to give. And in fairness, that 76, 77, he did pull his tripe out for Liverpool, as he always did. In fairness,
he did. What he didn't play, I don't think he played his best. Certainly, there was some times, because I mean, I know in the run up to the. In the run up to the end, it was a spectacular year, 77. But in the run up, there were a couple of there were times when things weren't going right. Nigel, I remember hearing boos off the cop, and they weren't. You can understand. We don't like people sort of leaving us, so to speak.
Especially as local lads, because we'd play for nothing. We've always said this.
Of course, yeah. But he I mean, he goes to Hamburg. He pulled it out the fire, didn't he, in the European Cup final in Rome. The league obviously had been a fantastic, ending to the thing. Then we had the FA Cup and European Cup final to look forward to. So he went out. He definitely went out on a high note, which who can blame him? Actually, I was going to say, when the club once said to me, and I mean, Bob Paisley said, it told me that different clubs had come in for me. He said, but you're not going anywhere, da-di-da-di-da. And then one time, then he says to me, he said, would you be interested in? Well, once they say it like that, then said, well, Liverpool, it's in their mind. So I can understand how, because I saw that from Bob Paisley. That's how I ended up making my mind up to leave. You think, well, if they're saying now all of a sudden, well, they must be prepared. They say, well, we don't want you to go, but would
you fancy it? Like
there you go.
Well, this Q&A thing, the ticket allowed you to actually go meet Kevin and have your photograph with him. So he's probably heard it millions of times before, but I went up and I was like a kid, because he was my first idol, And I went up, shook his hand, and had my photograph, and I said, "You broke me heart when you left, And he said, "Did I?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I didn't know what Liverpool were going to go." I said, and then some Scottish fella came. I said, "I forgot about you. I forgot about you 6 weeks later." And he started laughing. He was fantastic. Some of the stories that he told, not just at Liverpool, but at Hamburg and Newcastle, he had the audience under his spell. He was really good,
Oh, it's very interesting, obviously, and people do like to hear the backstory. I mean, we played Hamburg 3 times that year after he went. We played a friendly. We went and played them in the summer. I think we lost 3-2, I think. But then we had them to play in the Super Cup, and they weren't the greatest of results for Kevin from Kevin's side.
6-0, I think the home match
was 6-0. It was amazing, and he definitely did. There were a few tears on his face on that night. That really broke his heart. Sort of coming back to Anfield and being humiliated like that,
I think it's funny, isn't it? You talk, like 77, the 77 season, the way it ended. We won the league, we lost the FA Cup, and funny enough, I didn't think he played his greatest game in the FA Cup final.
No, he didn't. No.
I remember there was one instance. It was me 21st birthday, the FA Cup, and I remember the FA Cup final. And I remember Stepney made a save, and he never followed in. And then he sort of regrouped and then made a fantastic, and dived on top of it. And there was mumblings. I think that's what you were talking about, David, at the time. There was mumblings that that he worried that he wasn't really, his heart wasn't really in it. But then he goes in the European Cup final and dispels that completely. Game of his life. There's a few funny things that I think looking back, I think from the way he went, it was a strange team to go to, Hamburg. You could understand if he was leaving Liverpool and he'd have gone to one of the two big Spanish teams at the time, but Hamburg seemed a strange team to go to. But my final thing with Kevin was, I remember Les knows only too well. We had his phone number, and when Liverpool won the league in 2020, we phoned up players to come on, didn't we? Because it was in the middle of COVID, and we phoned up. We got players to come on and go on a Zoom meeting for the supporters club, and Les said to me, phone him up. And I sat there. It's the strangest thing. I phoned him up and explained, and he said he didn't really do Zoom meetings where he couldn't see the audience. He didn't sort of feel it was right. But I spent about 25 minutes talking to him about all different things about football and games and just a strange, surreal moment sitting in the back garden while the world was shut down, having a conversation with Kevin Keegan. There was the strangest sort of feeling. He finished at the end and he said, enjoy what you do. He said, enjoy. I hope you go on to do great things. And he said, you know what, you'll never walk alone. I thought, after the end of it all, and what you said, that I think in Liverpool supporters' eyes, that I think Liverpool, that's where it's sort of, when we do things, and he was up there in the top 10 of all time of great Liverpool players, but I think he gets slightly overlooked because of, the way he left. But in my eyes, he was probably one of the greatest players that I've seen in my lifetime,
Mike,
I think that stuff through over the last weeks and that. I mean, that's got different thoughts on all that, but I think he does get overlooked in how great he should be remembered because of the impact of him. We've said enough of it earlier, through tonight. I mean, the impact he made and what he generated in that group is worthy of a real super standing in our history. And he should be remembered much greater than he has been, but equally Emily Hughes should have been as well. They were such a big part of such an incredible period. It does get overlooked for different reasons. People have their I don't know. Maybe they don't understand, but those two were massive, through all those times, and deserve much more greater recognition.
Mike, that 1977 season where they finished with, Kevin's last game being in Rome and the glory of Rome. It was a fitting end, wasn't it, that he won yet another double at Liverpool, come close to winning the treble. And he gave a really top performance in that final in Rome.
Yeah, and obviously that he was instrumental in winning the penalty from which Phil Neal scored, and ultimately at that point we knew we'd won it. I was just checking back. The other thing to mention about Kevin, his last goal for Liverpool, Manchester United. So
Yeah, 1-0.
Yeah,
so
1-0, yeah.
how perfect way to go out with a goal against Man U. Yeah, I mean, he's brilliant, and David's right. He should be remembered, and I think it might have been Tom. Every time we said earlier, every time we put our team together, the best Liverpool team ever, he never quite gets a mention, and yet, the more you look back on it, he's definitely knocking on the door of that. I think the one thing that if Kenny hadn't come along straight afterwards, wearing the number 7 shirt and having the success that Kenny had, people would remember more about Kevin, I think. But that shouldn't detract from what he achieved. He was, for people our age, he was the reason a lot of people started watching Liverpool Football Club. And I'll never forget him for that. To go out the way that he did, winning the league, nearly winning the FA Cup, and winning the biggest club prize of all, was perfect, really.
Yeah, it was, and as I say, it was a perfect way to him to end his Liverpool career. And then, as Pete said, not long after, he broke our hearts when it was announced that he was finally joining Anfield. One thing I want to say about Kevin Keegan is that, I used to spend a lot of my school holidays up at Anfield and then going to Melwood, and I used to see you getting on the coach at both Anfield and Melwood. I have to say, Dave, you never refused an autograph of anybody, never refused a photograph either. And there was a lot of that group are always all the same. But Kevin, when they used to let us into Melwood to watch us train, it was amazing that Kevin was always the last one to get on the coach, and Ronnie Moran would be shouting at him, Kevin, come on, we need to get back. But he would never get on the coach until he'd signed the last autograph or had his last photograph taken. And he was perfect for that. You know what I mean? It just summed him up. And Emlyn Jr., who's normally on the podcast with us, Dave, he sort of says to send his regards to you, but he was telling us that his nickname among the players was Andy McDaft.
Andy McDaft, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Where did that come from?
Because he did daft. He'd go out. I remember one time we were in mid-season break. We were over Wrexham way, North Way. We went to see Wrexham, and he didn't have a coat. He'd have I remember he said like he'd do that things, and he had this kind of, you had to see it really. He wouldn't do an impersonation of it, but he knew himself. He did have a habit of doing silly, daft things. Yeah, that's strange actually. I was only saying that to somebody yesterday. Andy McDaft was his nickname in the in the group. He could laugh at himself, and that's great about people. Sometimes people take themselves too seriously, and they don't think. You can't say that about me, and then people get on on their high put themselves on a pedestal. But Kevin was, as great as he was as a footballer and a person, he could laugh at himself. Maybe he'd made a sort of a mistake in terms of what he was wearing or something like that. Give him his due, he could laugh at himself, and I think that's a nice thing to have in your personality.
Yeah, Tom. Just last thing from each of us now on Kevin. What's your ultimate memory of Kevin, and how will you remember him as as a Liverpool legend in your mind?
I remember the last memory of Kevin is what I said before, Les. The man, he was approachable, lovely fella, really kind. And had great things to say. As the footballer, he probably had a period when you're growing up, and it's the most influential period of your life as a young man when you're in your teens and you're going to a young fella. He played a major part in that, and he was with so many other brilliant players. He was just a joy to watch. And being a Liverpoolian in that 6-year period was probably, we had some of the greatest times of our life. I've said on numerous occasions, like 1976, winning the league in 1976, and just an incredible feeling, which, and winning the European Cup 77, it's just a great time to be a Liverpoolian, and Kevin played such a major part of that. And you know, like he'd be sadly missed.
Pete, same question to you.
I think we said it all about him, haven't we? He just came from nowhere really, and he just lit the place up and not just for 10 minutes, but for all the time he was at Anfield. He was our first real superstar, if you want. He had pop star qualities. All the girls fancied him, and all the lads wanted to be him on the pitch because of how he played. He took that into management as well as style of play. I think all the teams he managed, Newcastle, Fulham, even England when he only lasted a season, and Man City, he got his team. They played in his image, didn't he? All exciting football, and we've heard so many tributes about Kevin in the last day or so, not just about his football prowess, but just as he was as a man off the pitch. Sadly missed, but like Tom said, we were so lucky to have been able to go into that, to watch him in that era. It was a joy to go to the match every week and see him play. He was just a live wire, wasn't he?
Mike?
Well, I'll give you two short ones. One as a player and one as a man. The player one, I just remember there was a goal. I think it was 1976. There was a goal against Leeds in a 2-0 win, but he ran across from the right wing to kind of inside left, took it on his chest, and he flicked it over the keeper with the outside of his foot into the Anfield Road end net. And I just remember going home with my dad, just talking about that goal all the way to the car, all the way through the tunnel, all the way home. Just that goal, Dad. Did you and how he fantastic? Just I mean, I was already a disciple by then, but that was just that was kind of a Cruyff moment for me. That level of skill. And the other one, it's not really my memory, and I'll show you this picture. Obviously, you know I do quite a lot of charity walks. We were doing one in 2019 to mark the 30th anniversary of Hillsborough, and it just so happened that my brother-in-law Woody bumped into Kevin at Motorway Services. Kevin was going to do a speaking engagement somewhere, and he bumped into him, and Woody had one of our T-shirts for the event, so he asked him if he'd sign it. And he just stopped and he talked to him for about 20 minutes about the event and about, where it was going, what it was all for. And he signed it and took a picture of him signing it and holding it up, and got some stranger in the car park to take the picture. And he went, just hold on. And he opened his boot and he had a box full of England shirts from the era when he played, and he took one out and he signed that one. He gave him, see if he can auction that or something, and see if he can do that. And, he didn't have to do that, but he wasn't fobbed off with Woody approaching him, and he just spent 20 minutes talking to him about what he was doing, and then he gave him that, and that was just a lovely gesture. And I just thought, fantastic, when you think you can't like the man anymore, he does stuff like that.
Yeah, brilliant. And as I say, just for me, just all the memories that they have of him scoring the goals on the pitch, the one at Wolves, the two in the FA Cup final. Every time I met him, he would speak to you. He wouldn't make you feel as though you shouldn't be approaching him. I remember one night, coming home from school, I'd gone to get the 86 bus with my mate, and we were waiting for the 86 bus outside Lewis's. And while we were waiting there, I went to look in the shop that used to sell motorbikes. And as I looked in there was Kevin with his wife, Jean, and we waited for him to come out. And I said, can we have your autograph? Really nervously. And he signed our books, was talking to us for 5 minutes. Just an incredible man. You know what I mean? And I think the beauty of it is the, David was right. There was a little bit of resentment when he left Liverpool because nobody had ever done it before. But I think when you look back, wherever he's been, he's loved by all the fans. He's still loved by Liverpool fans. He's adored by Hamburg, Southampton, Newcastle. What an incredible man. And I think the final word tonight should go to Dave, who's lost a friend and a former teammate. So just saying a few words, Dave, pay a little tribute to Kevin.
Well, he was a fantastic person, and as one of the boys was saying, we've heard so many tributes of him over the last 24 hours or so. But he was always generous with his time, generous with his cent, in what he gifted to people. He gave people time. That's a great thing to have. Something happened to him as a young lad, and he always said that he would never refuse to sign an autograph, and to stick with that right through his career and his life has been amazing, because he was renowned for being. He was the best I'd ever seen at personal relations with people. There's many sportsmen in all kinds of fields, but they don't give time. They feel too precious. But Kevin was very generous with his time, and he never gloated, and he never talked about his achievements. And one thing, that even though he achieved so much, he was, I said earlier on, he was a superstar, and yet everything he did it in a super way, So yeah, we'll miss him, and I know he was very, very, he was, confident that he was going to shake this off. He told Carol McDermott a few weeks ago. He said, "Don't be rubbing me off your Christmas card list." But unfortunately, it's been very, very cruel, and the events of yesterday are very, very sad.
It is. So all we can say on the podcast is, on behalf of all Liverpudlians, but certainly on behalf of all of us on the LFC Red Post podcast, is thanks for the memories, Kevin. You'll be missed, and you'll never walk alone. And on that note, we'll end this edition of the LFC Red Post podcast. Thanks to Tom, Mike, Pete, and our special guest, David Fairclough, for joining us tonight. As you always end the podcast by saying, don't bite the sun, you'll never walk alone. Justice for 97 and forever 20. Until next time, see you soon.